I learned about this guy, Dan Wootton, from following Johnny and Amber, and Dan wrote not such nice things about Johnny in The Sun, and now, as you see, Dan's got allegations against him. This is from the Byline Times. It's actually an interview with the guy who's accusing Dan. Now, I gotta say real quick, if you're on a diet or something like that, I'd say put it on hold just this one time. Get out the popcorn, because this one's gonna be good. Turby's Truth: How Murdoch Made Dan Wootton into a Monster. All Alex Turby wanted was to find the washing powder. Instead, he says he found the key to a scandal now rocking the British media, and you know who it's about. Alex Turby is the former partner of GB News' biggest ratings puller, Dan Wootton, the New Zealand journalist who's made a career out of invading private lives and passing public judgment for big bucks, as we know. From Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and Philip Schofield to pop star Duncan James the Late, tragic Caroline Flack, Wootton was Rupert Murdoch's celebrity attack dog for more than a decade. So, when instead of cleaning his clothes one fateful day in 2012, Mr. Turby happened, he says, upon Wootton's own dirty laundry, his conscience simply would not let him take the easy path of turning a blind eye, as many others have done since. In his first ever interview, Mr. Turby gently spoke and, determined with a pronounced sense of fair play, relates the events that led to Byline Times' special 3-year investigation being published last month. This newspaper's reports have exposed Wootton as a serial sexual catfisher, blackmailer, and prolific workplace bully, all of which the presenter denies. Of course, that's to be expected when it happens to Mr. Dan. Of course, it didn't actually happen. They say they asked Dan's representatives to confirm if he was actually connected to this Martin Branning, who was allegedly a fake name he used when he was pulling these little stunts. Then they go on to say, but for Alex Turby, it all began behind the big double doors of the laundry cupboard in Dan Wootton's former one-bedroom flat on Lamont Street in London's sought-after E1 postcode. Sounds like someone pretty close to Dan. A cat-sitting discovery. I was cat-sitting for Dan while he was on holiday in New Zealand, Mr. Turby explains. One day, I was doing some laundry, I was looking for the dowsing ball for the washing up powder, and put my hand down the side of the washing machine. And there was a holdall rammed down there. Intrigued and suspicious, Mr. Turby says he pulled at the black nylon and found the bag zipped and secured. I could tell it had stuff in it, he says. It wasn't just an unused sports bag or something, and my immediate reaction was that it was hiding something. So I pulled it out completely and found there was a little travel padlock where the holes in the zips met. And so I thought, okay, this is weird, and because it was a flexible bag, I crumpled it to get the zip open wide enough just to get my hand fully inside and started pulling stuff out. Now I got a note here. These are very detailed recollections, unlike some people who say, well, Brian did this, Brian did that, but I can't remember the rest. So let's just keep in mind, this is detailed. Among other personal items, Mr. Turby says he found computer storage devices. There were also 2 external hard drives, he says, and I was very interested in those, as I think a lot of people also are. I plugged one in, and there was one file I was drawn to because I recognized the name as someone who was a friend of Dan's. I started to dig into the folder, and there was a video and text file which I opened first. It was the transcripts of an MSN Messenger conversation between 2 people. One was Martin Branning, whose name I'd never heard before, and the other was the boyfriend of the person whose name was on the file. The transcript was between the boyfriend and Martin Branning. Branning was introducing himself as someone who was interested in making some sexual content. The transcript was essentially persuading the boyfriend to make this video without the consent of his partner if necessary, and that's where we get to the illegal part. He adds, the video file was exactly what I expected based on the transcripts. It was a wide shot of a bed from a camera put up high in order. I immediately thought for it not to be seen. It was one of the two people having sex. And I took it from the video that Wootton's target had no knowledge or consent of that being made at all. Thank you, Alex. That seems not so nice. Some people have been saying karma's coming, even Carmageddon. They then go on to say that Alex and Dan were together on and off for 3 years, which is a pretty long time to be snooping around and finding out stuff. And they quote Turby here: I had always known Dan was obsessive about this person. I had never found it healthy, Mr. Turby told Byline Times. My immediate gut reaction was that Martin Branning did not exist. It didn't make sense. How could it have come into Dan's possession? And I knew that Dan was already obsessive about the target. I knew Dan was Branning and that he had manipulated the partner into making the video. I felt sick to my stomach. Dan was my boyfriend. I was horrified. Sounds like something that Eve Barlow says. I was sick to my stomach. But in this case, it was actually sickening. Allegedly. Alright, let's not forget this is allegedly. We still gotta see more, but it's detailed. Let's keep that in mind. And when Dan came back to the UK, I confronted him about it. He didn't even try to deny it. I said to him, Martin Branning doesn't exist, it's you. And he fell on his knees and said, I'm sorry, I really effed up, I can't help it. It was him, he did it, and from that day, I've known 100% that Martin Branning does not exist. He's just a name and an MSN account and email that Dan has been using to fix stuff for himself. And this here, Mr. Turby says, was the mark of the end of their relationship. Mr. Turby also says he tried to leave a few times, but he was very fearful of Dan. He claims Dan was watching and monitoring him. It enabled the worst parts of him and amplified them. And Mr. Turby goes on to say it wasn't always like this. At one time, Alex Turby thought Dan to be the love of his life. He also thought Dan was something like a best mate. He goes on to say he was at a vulnerable point and they ended up getting together because the guy didn't want to lose Dan. But okay, doesn't seem totally relevant. And they end this section with this. Wootton's growing power at the then must-read newspaper in the English-speaking world led to practices which Mr. Turby now regards as potentially corrupt, which gave Wootton the financial power to further his own interest. And as we know, what happened to Johnny wasn't exactly right. You could say there was some unjust things going on there. Dan had the News of the World pay money to my bank account as a source an absolute minimum of 10 years. He told me it was for his actual sources, and I knew his boss knew who I was, so I didn't question it too much. It was never life-changing sums, always hundreds, not thousands, but still big lumps. I didn't really understand his world. I just thought it was a normal thing for reporters to do sometimes in order to protect people's confidences. I would give the money to him, and I don't know what happened to it after that. He had other friends who'd do it for him too. Okay, so this here, very detailed. Obviously, the story about how he found the hard drive. This guy doesn't claim he's forgetting anything. No memory loss like some certain people we know. And he's getting real detailed on how Dan used to use his influence to control these matters. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. This here is actually part 1. There's a teeny bit more, which I'm going to talk about coming up soon. But for now, if you're not subscribed here, consider it. If you don't, I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. See you next time. Turby's truth. Murdoch. Dan Wootton a monster. This is getting good. They were all I'm trying not to laugh, guys. I mean, this is just very entertaining here. I mean, I'm just trying my best. All right. All right. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm sorry. This is oh man, all right. I'm totally sober too.